People think a perfect marriage is a blessing. They never tell you it can also be a warning. The night I understood this, my wife was asleep beside me, breathing evenly, her face calm, almost angelic. The room was quiet, the kind of quiet couples dream about. No arguments, no tension. No unanswered questions hanging in the air. And yet, my chest felt tight. Because for the first time in 8 years of marriage, she hadn't asked me where I'd been. Our life used to be normal, not perfect, just real. Mornings were rushed and messy. Coffee spilled, shirts wrinkled. Small arguments about nothing important. She used to complain that I worked too much. I used to complain that she worried too much. We argued about bills, about weekends, about plans we never followed through on. That's what marriage looked like to me, two imperfect people trying, failing, trying again. So when everything suddenly became smooth, I should have been happy. Instead, I felt like I was standing on thin ice. It started on a Monday. I came home late from work, later than usual. The office had been chaos, deadlines stacked on top of deadlines. Normally, my phone would have been full of messages by then. Where are you? Are you still at work? Why aren't you answering? That night, there was nothing. When I opened the door, the apartment smelled like freshly cooked food. Soft music played in the background. The lights were dim, warm, intentional, like she had planned the atmosphere. She looked up from the kitchen and smiled. Not her usual tired smile. Not the polite one. This one was calm. Hey, she said gently. You must be exhausted. No accusation. No frustration. No clock watching. I remember standing there, keys still in my hand, confused by how peaceful it felt. Sorry I'm late, I said automatically. She waved it off. Don't worry about it. Dinner's ready whenever you are. That should have been the moment I felt lucky. Instead, a quiet voice in my head whispered, this isn't her. Over dinner, she listened more than she spoke. She nodded at my complaints, smiled at my jokes, touched my hand at all the right moments. She didn't interrupt. She didn't challenge me. She didn't push back. At one point, I paused mid-sentence and looked at her. What? She asked, still smiling. Nothing, I said. But it wasn't nothing. She hadn't checked her phone once. In the past, she used to glance at my screen when it lit up. Not aggressively, just a habit. I never hid anything, so I never cared. It was part of our rhythm. That night, my phone buzzed twice on the table. She didn't look. She didn't even flinch. I unlocked it casually, watching her from the corner of my eye. Nothing. No curiosity. No suspicion. No interest. That was the first crack. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. She stopped asking questions. Not just about where I went, but about everything. How was work? Did that meeting go well? Who were you with? Gone. Instead, she said things like, do whatever makes you happy. You deserve your space. I trust you. People dream of hearing those words. I felt trapped by them. By Thursday, my friends noticed. She's changed. One of them laughed over drinks. Man, you hit the jackpot. I forced a smile. Because how do you explain that perfection feels wrong when you've lived with imperfection for years? That night, I tested something. I told her I'd be working late again, even though I had no plans. Okay, she said instantly. Drive safe. No hesitation. No follow up. No disappointment. I left the apartment and sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the building. I half expected her to call, to text, to question. She didn't. When I came back 2 hours later, she was already asleep. And for the first time, I wondered if she cared whether I came home at all. By the weekend, the unease had settled deep inside me. Saturday mornings used to be our thing. Lazy breakfasts, shared silence, occasional arguments about chores. That Saturday, she woke up early and made breakfast alone. I thought you liked doing this together, I said. She smiled again, that calm smile. I know, she said. I just wanted you to rest. Always the right answer. Always perfectly timed. That afternoon, she suggested I meet my friends. You've been working so hard, she said. You should go out more. That sentence echoed in my head. You should go out more. It didn't sound like encouragement. It sounded like permission. The real moment. The one. I can't forget came Sunday night. We were lying in bed, lights off, the room quiet except for the hum of the city outside. I reached for my phone, scrolling absent-mindedly. In the past, she would have leaned in, teased me, asked who I was texting. This time, she turned away. I froze. 3 weeks earlier, we'd argued because I replied too slowly to a message while sitting next to her. Now? Nothing. That's when it hit me. She wasn't trying to fix our marriage. She was already finished with it. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I watched her breathing, counted the seconds between each rise and fall of her chest. She looked peaceful, lighter somehow, as if something heavy had already been lifted from her. I, on the other hand, felt heavier than ever, because sudden love doesn't appear out of nowhere. It replaces something. The next morning, I noticed small things. Her phone was always face down now. She took calls in another room. She started organizing documents late at night. When I asked what she was doing, she answered smoothly. Just cleaning things up. Cleaning. That word stayed with me. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe she was just changing. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe peace felt strange because I'd gotten used to chaos. But deep down, I knew better. You don't wake up one day and stop caring without a reason. On Wednesday evening, as I hung my jacket, I noticed something odd. Her bag was lighter. Not physically, emotionally. It was missing the clutter she used to carry everywhere. Old receipts. Random notes. Lip balm she never finished. Everything unnecessary was gone. Only essentials remained. That night, I asked her directly, "Are you happy?" I said. She didn't answer immediately. Then she smiled. "I am," she said softly. "Aren't you?" I wanted to say yes, but my mouth stayed closed because happiness doesn't feel like being slowly erased. And as she turned off the light and settled into sleep beside me, the truth finally surfaced, clear, cold, undeniable. She wasn't becoming perfect for me. She was becoming perfect to leave me. And the scariest part? I still didn't know how or when or what she was planning to take with her when she did. Perfection doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, like a room that's been cleaned too well, everything in its place, nothing left behind to prove someone ever lived there. By the second week, that was our apartment. She stopped leaving traces of herself around the house. No half-finished mugs on the counter. No clothes draped over chairs. No random notes or lists taped to the fridge. Everything was tidy. Intentional. Temporary. It felt less like a home and more like a place someone was preparing to leave. At first, I tried to enjoy it. I told myself this was what maturity looked like. Growth, trust, a marriage evolving into something calmer and more secure. But calm has a texture. And this felt hollow. One evening, as I took off my shoes, I realized something unsettling. She hadn't asked me how my day was in almost 10 days. Not once. She listened when I spoke, nodded, smiled, responded with just enough interest to seem present, but she never invited conversation. Never dug deeper. Never circled back. It was as if she already knew the answers, or no longer cared about them. I tested it again. "I might have to travel for work next month," I said casually, watching her reflection in the mirror. "That's fine," she replied. Instantly. "It'll be good for you." No questions, no curiosity, no planning around us. Just acceptance. Acceptance can be comforting, but it can also be a form of detachment. Her affection changed too. She still touched me, but briefly, lightly. Like someone afraid of leaving fingerprints. A kiss on the cheek instead of the lips. A hand on my shoulder instead of an embrace. Warm gestures without weight. The kind you give someone you're already letting go of. One night, as we watched television, I noticed her eyes weren't on the screen. They were distant. Focused inward. "Everything okay?" I asked. She turned to me slowly, as if I'd interrupted a private thought. "Perfect," she said, smiling. That word again. I started paying attention to timing. She woke up earlier than usual. Went to bed earlier too. Her routine became rigid, precise. People don't change their routines unless they're making room for something else. Or preparing for the absence of someone. Her phone became a silent object in our house. Always on mute. Always face down. Always within reach. But she never checked it in front of me anymore. If it rang, she stepped away. If a message arrived, she waited. I never saw the screen light up, but I felt it, like a pulse under the surface. One afternoon, I came home early without telling her. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I heard her voice from the bedroom, soft, controlled, careful. She was on a call. I paused, listening. "I understand," she said calmly. "Yes, everything is going smoothly." Pause. "No, he doesn't suspect anything." My heart slammed against my ribs. I stepped back instinctively. My breath caught in my throat. When she came out minutes later, her face was composed, relaxed. "Hey," she said. "You're early." "Yeah," I replied, forcing my voice steady. "Who were you talking to?" She didn't hesitate. "Just a friend," she said. A clean answer. Too clean. That night, sleep refused to come. My mind replayed her words over and over. Everything is going smoothly. Smoothly toward what? The next few days, I noticed something else. She began encouraging distance. "You should spend more time with your friends. You've earned your freedom. You don't need to check in all the time." Each sentence pushed me slightly further away. Not aggressively. Gently. Like guiding someone toward an exit without pointing to the door. My friends thought I was lucky. "She's finally chill," one of them said. "Man, that's rare." I laughed. When they laughed, but inside, something was tightening. Because love doesn't fade into peace. It fades into silence. I tried to talk to her, really talk. One evening, I turned off the TV and faced her. "Do you feel distant lately?" I asked. She looked at me, surprised but not offended. "Distant?" She repeated softly. "Yes," I said. "Like you're already somewhere else." She studied my face carefully. Then she reached for my hand. "You're overthinking," she said gently. "I'm right here." Her hand was warm. Her presence wasn't. That was when I realized something crucial. She was responding to me, not connecting with me. There's a difference. Late one night, while brushing my teeth, I caught her reflection watching me. Not lovingly. Assessing. Like she was memorizing something. My posture. My habits. My patterns. As if she needed to remember them one last time. I began documenting things quietly. Times she stepped out. Calls she took. Things she stopped asking. Not because I wanted to accuse her. Because I wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Then came the smile. The one that changed everything. We were in the kitchen. I dropped a glass by accident. It shattered loudly across the floor. In the past, she would have jumped, scolded me, helped immediately. This time she didn't move. She just watched. And smiled. Not cruelly, not warmly. Just knowingly. That smile told me something terrifying. She wasn't reacting anymore. She was observing. That night, as she slept, I stared at the ceiling again. But this time, the fear was sharper. Because perfection wasn't the absence of conflict. It was the absence of attachment. And I finally understood the truth I had been avoiding. She wasn't pretending to love me. She was practicing how to leave me without causing a scene. By the end of that week, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever she was planning, it was already in motion. And I was running out of time to catch up. I was about to toss them aside when one envelope caught my eye. It was from a bank we didn't use. At least, not that I knew of. I stared at the logo, my pulse quickening, and slid my finger under the flap. The paper inside was crisp, official, unfamiliar. A balance statement. Her name was on it. Not mine. At first, I told myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe she'd opened a separate account for savings. People did that, right? Still, my hands shook as I folded the paper back into the envelope. She hadn't mentioned it. That night, I waited. I watched her movements carefully. The way she moved through the apartment with practiced ease. The way she spoke without excess words. The way she smiled without emotion. I placed the envelope on the table between us. Did you open a new account? I asked casually. She glanced at it, then at me. Yes, she said. I needed one for something personal. Something personal? I nodded slowly. What kind of something? I asked. She met my eyes without blinking. Just planning ahead. She said. The conversation ended there. No defensiveness. No irritation. No explanation. Just closure without clarity. Over the next few days, more small things appeared. Receipts tucked into pockets she used to leave empty. Withdrawals that didn't match our expenses. Charges labeled vaguely services, consultation, processing. Each one alone meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern. I stopped asking questions. Instead, I watched. I memorized her routines, her timing, her tone. I learned which nights she slept deeper, which mornings she woke earlier, which expressions meant distraction rather than peace. She was careful. But nobody is flawless forever. The first real mistake came late on a Thursday. She left her bag on the couch and went to shower. It sat there. Unzipped. Waiting. I told myself not to touch it. I stood there for a long moment, my heart pounding, guilt and fear wrestling inside my chest. Then I reached in. Her bag was emptier than I expected. No clutter. No excess. Just documents, copies of identification. A small notebook. And a phone. Not her phone. A second one. My breath caught. The device was off, smooth and cold in my hand. No case. No scratches. Bare. Anonymous. Someone preparing to disappear. Doesn't carry personal things. They carry tools. I returned everything exactly as I found it. My hands were steady now. Fear had sharpened into focus. That night I lay awake, listening to her breathe, replaying every moment of the past month. The calm. The distance. The encouragement to go out. The silence. It all aligned. The next day, I did something I never thought I would. I checked our shared computer history. Most of it was normal. But buried beneath routine searches was a folder labeled with a random string of numbers. I clicked. Inside were scans. Contracts. Authorization forms. Travel documents. And one document that made my blood run cold. It carried my name. And my signature. I stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. The signature was perfect. Every curve. Every angle. Identical to mine. Except I had never signed it. The document authorized financial decisions on my behalf. Temporary. It said. Limited. It said. Necessary. It said. Necessary for what? I closed the laptop just as I heard the front door open. She stepped inside, calm as ever. Hey, she said. You look tired. I nodded, forcing myself to breathe normally. Long day, I replied. She smiled. That same unreadable smile. Dinner passed in silence. Not awkward. Controlled. I watched her hands as she ate, steady, precise, unhurried. Hands capable of forging trust. That night, I confronted the truth alone. This wasn't emotional distance. It was preparation. And I was no longer the center of her world. I was an obstacle she was carefully stepping around. The final crack came the following morning. She left early, forgetting one thing. The notebook. I opened it carefully. Inside were names. Dates. Amounts. And one name that didn't belong. A man I had never heard of. Written repeatedly. Underlined. That name followed me all day. At work. On the train. In my thoughts. By evening, I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. When she came home, I asked softly, "Who is he?" She froze. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. Her eyes hardened, not with anger, but calculation. Why do you ask? She said. I held the notebook in my hand. She didn't reach for it. She didn't deny it. She just looked at me. And in that look, I saw something I had never seen before. Not love. Not guilt. Strategy. That was the moment I understood. The first crack had opened. And whatever was behind it was already breaking through. That night, something between us shifted permanently. The house was the same, the routines were the same, but the balance of power had changed. She knew I had seen something, I knew she knew, and neither of us said it out loud. The next morning she acted as if nothing had happened. She made coffee, she asked if I wanted toast, she reminded me to take my jacket because it might rain. Normal words, normal gestures, but behind them was a wall I had never felt before. When I left for work, she kissed my cheek. Not goodbye, not affection, a signal. From that day on, I stopped reacting emotionally. Fear was no longer useful, confusion was no longer helpful. If she was playing a long game, one needed to see the full board. I began reconstructing her days. Not obsessively, methodically. I noted when she left the house, when she returned, which days she was busy and which ones she wasn't. Emerged quickly, she disappeared every Tuesday afternoon, always for exactly 2 hours. Always with her phone turned off. He followed her once from a distance, far enough not to be noticed. Close enough not to lose her. She didn't go to a cafe, she didn't meet friends. She entered an office building I had never been to before. Glass front, no signs. Anonymous. She stayed inside for 1 hour and 46 minutes, then she came out looking lighter. Relieved. That night, I checked the documents again, slower. This time smarter. What I had thought were random files were carefully categorized: financial transfers, identity verification, legal authorizations, all pointing toward one outcome: a clean exit. She wasn't planning to leave in anger, she was planning to leave correctly, with preparation, with protection, with control. The most disturbing part wasn't the money, it was the identity trail: addresses being updated, emails redirected, permissions assigned. My life was being rearranged without my consent. I realized then why she had become so calm, why she encouraged my distance, why she didn't fight anymore. She wasn't losing me. She was extracting herself from me. One evening I tested her again. I might take a short trip alone, I said. She smiled instantly. That's a great idea. No sadness, no curiosity, no concern, just approval. That night while she showered, I opened her laptop. I knew exactly where to look now, a hidden folder, password protected. I tried something reckless, our anniversary date. It opened. Inside were emails. Carefully written, formally worded, emotionless conversations with lawyers, with financial consultants, with someone listed only as Emma. Same name from the notebook. One email froze me completely. Once everything is transferred, I'll disappear quietly. He won't realize what happened until it's irreversible. I closed the laptop. My hands were cold. She came out of the bathroom wrapped in a towel, humming softly. She looked at me and smiled. You okay? She asked. Yes, I said, and for the first time I meant something different than she expected. That night I didn't sleep. I didn't stare at the ceiling I planned, because now I knew the truth. She wasn't living one life, she was living two, and I was only present in the one she was preparing to abandon. By morning, one thing was clear: if I waited, I would lose everything, not just her, my name, my stability, my future. And so I made a decision I never thought I would make. I would stop being the subject of her plan and become part of it. If you can never unsee it. The pieces I had collected no longer felt scattered. They aligned too well, too deliberately. What she was building wasn't an escape fueled by emotion, it was a system. I started by tracing the money, not all at once, small amounts spread across weeks, withdrawals that wouldn't trigger alarms, transfers that looked like routine expenses. She wasn't draining our accounts, she was redirecting them. The more I looked, the clearer it became. Consultations weren't therapy. Sessions, processing fees weren't household expenses. Services weren't repairs or subscriptions, they were preparation costs, the price of disappearing cleanly. Found a timeline hidden inside one of the folders, not labeled as such, just dates, boxes. Checked steps, completed steps, pending. At the bottom, a final note: exit window, 14 days, 14 days. She had already chosen when our marriage would end, and she had done it without a single argument. The most painful discovery wasn't financial, it was emotional. I found messages she had written but never sent, drafts saved and revised, carefully worded explanations, neutral language, no blame, no regret, just distance disguised as kindness. One message stopped me cold: I don't hate you, I just don't want to belong to this life anymore, not us. This life. I understood then why she had been so peaceful. Closure had already happened for her. She was living in the after. The final confirmation came when I checked her travel history: one-way ticket, different city, different name, format, no return, no shared future. That night at dinner, she asked me something unexpected: would you be okay if I needed some time alone soon? A vague word, polite warning. I looked at her and nodded. Of course, I said. She smiled with relief. That smile hurt more than anger ever could, because it told me she believed I was still behind her, unaware, unprepared. I Went to the bathroom and stared at my reflection. I didn't recognize the man looking back at me, but I trusted him for the first time in weeks. I trusted myself more than her. From that moment on, I stopped thinking like a husband. I started thinking like someone who needed to survive a quiet erasure. I backed up everything: documents, emails, signatures. I created copies she didn't know existed. I spoke to professionals under neutral pretenses, asked questions without names, learned options without confrontation. The more I learned, the darker the truth became. If I did nothing, she would leave with access to my identity, with legal authority I never gave, with financial pathways already cleared. I wouldn't just be heartbroken, I would be compromised. The scariest part, she had planned it so cleanly that I would look unstable if I protested. Too late, confused, paranoid, bitter. Exactly how disappearing acts had protected. That night she fell asleep quickly. I stayed awake, not watching her, watching the clock, counting days backward from 14. I realized something else then. She didn't intend to destroy Mesh, intended to replace herself in my life without consequences, as if she had never been there. And that was when I made my final internal shift. I would not confront Harry, would not accuse Harry, would not beg. I would let her believe the plan was working, because the most dangerous moment in a strategy is when one side thinks it's already won. The plan had been revealed now. It was my turn to respond silently, precisely, without emotion. If you want, wars don't always begin with noise. Some begin with politeness, with cooperation, with two people smiling at each other while preparing for entirely different outcomes. That was our home now. I became careful in ways she didn't expect, not distant, not suspicious, normal. I laughed when I was supposed to laugh. I listened when she spoke. I left the house when she encouraged me. Played the version of myself she needed me to be. Behind that performance, I worked quietly. I separated my finances, updated access points, revoked permissions she had set in my name, one by one, slow enough not to alert her, fast enough to matter. Every move I made had a shadow. If she was planning 14 days ahead, I planned 20, not to win, to survive. She sensed something. I could tell, not from her words, but from her timing. She began checking her phone more often, sleeping lighter, asking subtle questions disguised as concern. Are you stressed lately? You seem distracted. I answered honestly, just tired. We became two people sharing a space without sharing intention. Dinner conversations were neutral. Physical contact was minimal. Emotional language disappeared entirely. It wasn't cold, it was professional. One night she tested me. Might leave for a few days, she said casually. Okay. I replied without hesitation. She watched me carefully, waiting for something. Reaction, resistance, fear. I gave her none. That was the moment I saw doubt flicker behind her eyes, just briefly, because control depends on predictability, and I had just become unpredictable. I gathered evidence methodically, not everything, only what mattered. Proof of forgery, proof of intent, proof of timeline, enough to protect myself, enough to end it if I had to. The hardest part wasn't strategy, it was memory. Every room held reminders of a version of her that no longer existed, or maybe never had. He had to mourn quietly without letting grief slow me down. One evening she asked me something I hadn't prepared for. Do you trust me? The question landed heavily between you. I looked at her not as my wife, as a woman executing a plan. Yes, I said, and the lie passed between us without resistance. The final days arrived faster than I expected. Her bag stayed packed, documents were arranged neatly. Her tone became lighter, almost relieved. She had already left emotionally. The body was just waiting to follow. Then she made a mistake. Hey, small one, but silence amplifies errors. She forwarded an email from the wrong account. For less than a second I saw Ida confirmation, ATMO location. I memorized it, didn't react, didn't ask, didn't confront. I simply adjusted my plan. That night she slept deeply confident. Didn't wake. Harry watched the ceiling once more. But this time fear wasn't there, only resolve, because the silent war had reached its final phase and only one of us knew it. The air that night felt heavier than usual. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic, the faint creak of floorboards was amplified in my ears. She moved around the apartment as if nothing were wrong, smiling, calm, perfect. I watched her from the doorway, pretending to be absorbed in my phone. Her shadow stretched across the living room floor. Could see the subtle rhythm of her breathing, the light in her eyes that betrayed nothing. Every motion was deliberate, controlled, measured. Dinner had been light. She had suggested I eat before she joined me. Another test, I realized too late. I played along, eating slowly, calmly. She entered later carrying a bottle of wine. Her Movements fluid and practiced. You look tired, she said softly, setting the bottle down. I nodded. Long day, I replied. Her eyes lingered on me, searching. After dinner, she suggested we watch a movie. I agreed. I didn't touch the remote. She chose something light, romantic, a test of normalcy. I watched her carefully, noting each gesture, each laugh, each pause. Then came the moment, the one I had been waiting for and dreading. Simultaneously, she leaned over, adjusting the blanket around my shoulders. You've been so quiet lately, she murmured. Everything okay? I let silence stretch. I let her feel the tension. I let her believe she still controlled the outcome. Everything is fine, I said finally, my voice steady, calm, not defensive, not accusatory, firm, neutral. Her smile faltered just slightly. She looked away for a fraction of a second, hiding the flicker of concern. I counted it in my head, 1, 2, 3, gone. Later, as she prepared for bed, I followed my plan meticulously. I reviewed the documents I had gathered, cross-checked emails, receipts, timestamps, every move she had made, every detail she thought I hadn't noticed. I was ready. She stirred slightly, sensing something, but it was too late. The game had shifted. The house, once hers to manipulate, was now neutral ground. The control she thought she had was gone. I lay beside her, pretending to sleep. My mind raced, mapping the next steps. The exit she had planned was blocked. The final advantage was mine. As the clock struck 1, I exhaled slowly. The tension didn't leave my body. It couldn't, but the fear had been replaced by a clarity I had never felt before, because tonight, the final night, wasn't about confrontation. It was about survival, and for the first time in weeks, I knew I could win. Ply strategically without destroying myself in the process. Morning came quietly. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long stripes across the floor. She stirred, stretching lazily, completely unaware that the house no longer belonged entirely to her plan. I watched from the corner of the room, calm, precise, controlled. I had followed her every move, anticipated her steps, and prepared my countermeasures. Her hidden accounts were neutralized, legal documents were verified. Every draft, every plan she had painstakingly created was now documented and contained. The advantage had shifted. She poured coffee in the kitchen, humming softly, completely unaware. I walked over casually, sat across from her, and sipped my own cup. Her eyes lingered on me, searching. Everything okay? She asked, voice cautious. Yes, I said, letting the word carry the weight of control I now held. Her brows furrowed slightly. A flicker of uncertainty passed across her face. By noon, she began to notice the cracks in her plan. Email she had scheduled remained unread. Transfers she expected to process stalled. Her confidence, once unshakable, wavered. I didn't speak. I didn't act aggressively. I let her see the consequences of her actions unfold naturally. The woman who had been so perfect, so precise, so unassailable, now looked around the apartment with doubt creeping into her eyes. Every step she had taken to escape was now visible in the light of preparation. She hadn't accounted for my preparation. We sat at the table quietly, no shouting, no accusations, no tears. She realized that her plan had been anticipated, that her secret life, her meticulous arrangements had all been mapped and countered. Finally, she exhaled, small and resigned. You were ready for me, she whispered. I didn't respond. I only nodded slightly. In that moment, the story that had been quietly unfolding for weeks came to a silent resolution, not with violence, not with chaos, but with clarity, control, and survival. I left the house briefly, returning with copies of all evidence she had tried to conceal, every document, every transfer, every hidden plan preserved, not out of vengeance but protection, my life, my identity, my future intact. When I returned, she was packing lightly, no anger, no protest, just acceptance. We parted without a fight. She walked out quietly. I watched her leave, not with relief, not with joy, but with a sober understanding. Sometimes love doesn't end with fireworks. Sometimes survival requires silence, patience, and strategy. I closed the door behind her, the apartment now echoing with emptiness, and in that silence I realized something powerful. I had won not by confrontation, but by awareness, observation, and calm preparation. If you want to see more thrilling stories of hidden secrets, suspenseful marriages, and shocking twists, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Share this story with friends who love suspense. They'll thank you later. Comment below, what would you have done if you were in his shoes?